All right, cousins. So we about to get into chapter 5 of Never Caught. It's called The Blacks in the Family. Now, y'all, if y'all remember, maybe like in chapter 2 or 3, I said that the author was kind of giving us a slow build. And then like maybe around chapter 4 and 5, she was going to punch us in the face. Honey, she went there in chapter 5 because it got juicy. So around this time, the Washingtons were all settled in Philly. However, George was on his 3-month tour throughout the South, from Maryland to GA, just, appeasing his followers. Around April 5th, 1791, he got this letter from Tobias Lear, somebody he employed. He paid them. And Tobias was like, look, bro, you still broke. You're still broke. And it's because you got too many slaves. And you got some other issues going on. Now, George is in VA getting this letter from Tobias. However, there was something else going on in Philly. So this attorney general by the name of Edmund Randolph showed up at the Philly house and was like, look, George, I got to talk to you, player. But it was Martha who answered the door. He was like, look, I really don't want to include you in men's business, Martha, but since you here and I ain't got no phone, I just want to go ahead and let you know what's going on because it's going down in Philly. So Randolph had lost 3 of his slaves due to this law that's being passed in Philly. Now he's an attorney and he was like, my slaves, they don't know how to read. They don't know the law. They can't do nothing about it. But he didn't count on the abolitionists getting a hold of them. And so they stood up and basically won their freedom using the law that says that you have been an adult in this state for 6 months and now you're free. So Randolph was like, let me put you on game, Martha, and I need you to go ahead and tell George. Because listen, I'm out here losing my free labor out here in these streets and I can't make 100% of the profits even though I do none of the work. And I'm just trying to put you up on game and let you know you could be in the same position. You heard me? So I need you to reach out to George and let him know what I'm trying to tell you. Martha was like, so boom, Tobias, reach out to George. We got to do something. Tobias let George know, like, look, you broke and you about to lose your property. This ain't looking too good, player. I don't know how you going to afford your lace front, but listen, this ain't it. You got to come up with an idea. So what you want us to do? What do you want us to do? So George was out here scheming here. George said, we're not going to break the law, but we're going to work around it. Because, that's how some of these people out here doing when they want to oppress black people. They don't break the law. They work around it to use it against people. George told the attorney general, look, go to Philly, become a citizen, and you're going to practice the law over there. Because if you practice law and you my right-hand man, you can tell me what's going on with the laws there, and we can be up on game and not have to worry about breaking it. And so we'll be aware when they start giving these abolitionists the right to free our slaves, right? George also was out here lying, saying that the abolitionists was out here enticing slaves to escape and run away because how dare they want their freedom? Like, don't you want to work for me for free for the rest of your life and I get paid and I enslave your children because they were born black because they come from you and you my slave? I'm just saying. So they implement this little process, right? And they think it's going to work. But they don't really know this law. Like, this is what happens when you don't read and you just get word of mouth. You don't do your own research. Stuff get fuddled up. So the author switched to give you a little bit of background about the abolitionist movement here, right? So Philly was only like a colony for about 7 years at this point. It was, ran by the Quakers. Don't forget, these are still colonizers taking people's land. And these Quakers were like, I be loving the Lord and he don't really want me enslaving people. Now, don't get it twisted. It wasn't all of them. So William Penn, over Pennsylvania, he showed up colonizing or whatever, but it was George Fox advocacy that said, we shouldn't be being so mean to our slaves. Maybe we could treat them humanely. And so the Quakers were like, okay, so we don't have to treat them in an inhumane way. But then the gears started turning. But as the wheels started turning, the Quakers, like in 1688, were like, I don't think the Lord would be getting down with us like this. I don't think he'd be behind the human trafficking. The Quakers was like, this little light of mine, I'm going to let it shine. And I can't have you out here blocking my blessings. So There were the Quakers that were in the city that were like, you know what? We love the Lord, but we still need this building fund to be paid. So we got to make our coins from the free labor. And then there were ones on the outskirts that were like, you know what? I'm tired of living in sin. So in 1711, they had this recommendation amongst their people and said, you know what? Maybe y'all shouldn't purchase human beings anymore. But it wasn't until like 79 years later that legislation actually passed and said, you know what, this abolitionist movement really needs to be a thing, and we need to have anti-slavery laws put in place. And so they abided, but they were like doing what most people's managers do, which is like try to get you to work off the clock so they can get you to work for free instead of paying you. Now let's go back to George. George and Tobias was trying to get this workaround to work, right? They couldn't break the law because technically he's the president. He's been president for 2 years. And he didn't want to upset the anti-slavery movement on the outside. He didn't care what it was like. Because he's like, as for me and my house, we going to own human beings to the day I die. So Washington included Martha in on this. Let me tell y'all something. Let's just have a brief moment for the white women a part of colonization and how people like to make it seem like they were innocent in all this, but Martha showed they were complicit. They were about that life, ride or die for their slave owning husbands. They were like, nah, boo, it's going to be me and you enslaving everybody and their mom because we ain't finna do no work up in this house. So Martha and George devised this plan to switch their slaves out every 6 months right before the cutoff time. They would get this close to freedom and be like, nope, switcheroo. So George sends word to Philly and was like, look, get the Negroes out, girl. You got to send them out. Separate them. Do what you got to do. They was dropping them off in Virginia and Jersey and Mount Vernon just to make sure that they would all miss out. So a week after all this started, they devised their little plan. Martha reached out to her little niece and was like, hey, niece. Fanny girl, how your mama now? I'm about to send Ona Judge's brother back your way, because we want him to be with his family. We know he misses them, and we want to show him that we care about him. We own him, you know. We're not gonna pay him. We're gonna own his family, but we care. So they trusted Austin to go about his business. They sent him with like $11.66 and was like, look, bro, get you something to eat, get you somewhere to stay, and get yourself back home. And he made it, and he was fine. However, the stuff hit the fan, and this is why you need to do your own research. Child, Martha got ready to put Christopher, Richmond, and Ona together on this little ride, and they were going on a field trip, and then Tobias was like, bump your brakes. You didn't read. George found out that somebody misspoke. Remember that law in Philly that said that if you were in the household for 6 months and you were a slave, if you were an adult, you could actually be emancipated. George thought it didn't extend to minors. And Christopher, Richmond, and Ona were all minors. He thought. George was like, oh, snap. Okay. All right. So we got to find out what we're going to do with them before they find out what's really going on. Now, they were trying to keep the slaves in the dark. I mean, most of the slaves don't know nothing what's going on with the master's business unless they ear hustling. But they really went out of their way to keep the slaves from knowing what was happening, right? George was freaking out because he was broken. He was like, I can't lose my property too. Lord, my lace fronts. I can't. So Martha was like, oh, I gotta ride it down for my man. So here's what Martha did. Martha was like, let me organize a trip. I'm going to send Ona and Christopher to Jersey. I'm going to send Giles and Paris with George. And then that only leaves Ma and Hercules. Now, Ma was a little old lady. They thought that Ma wasn't going to run nowhere. So they wasn't really worried about her. They just knew she was old. She was tired. She ain't finna go nowhere. Ain't nobody about to take care of her. But Hercules. Remember Hercules was the enslaved chef who was like this. And everybody respected him and he had his pool. Well, George made the mistake of giving Hercules an opportunity to make money. Hercules was out here selling scraps of his good because people was living for the leftovers, which y'all like to call the meal preps. So he was making him some little coins. He was also making friends. George and Martha was like, he just might use this law against us, and they confronted him. So Hercules was like, I am shocked and appalled. How dare you think that I will betray you, massa? And they were like, whew, well, we thought, you were in this situation, you thought you had a little bit of pull. He's like, no, eyes ain't going nowhere. Eyes be right here. Eyes be right here. Child. Hercules got them people all the way together. Hercules said on February 22nd in 1797, I'm about to get me and mine out the door. And he was gone and they never heard from him again. Boom. They was in their feelings. But I just want to let y'all know February 22nd, 1797 should be on your Black History Month. You need to make sure that you remember Hercules during the time of February Black History Month, because he outsmarted the Washingtons in their enslaving selves. Now, while all this was happening, from 1791 to 1796, George and Martha was out here beating the law, using the system to their advantage, shuffling their slaves back and forth. Now, George was out here appeasing the Southerners like, we all pro-slaves. We don't like to do work for ourselves. So we like you. And they were like, because, you believe like us. You believe that these slaves are out here. They need us. We feed them. We shelter them. We clothe them. What would they be without us if we did not enslave them? Yes, they do all the work. No, we don't pay them. But what would they be without us? Them people up north, they should stop trying to promote freedom, because what would the slaves be? Out here just dead and dying in the middle of the streets of starvation. If not for slavery, where would they be? Now, all of this is happening and Anna is watching. Anna was shuffled for about 5 years and her freedom was up in the air, but she took notice and she plotted and she strategized. That concludes the end of chapter 5, but I just want y'all to know it got juicy. I was like, oh, she went there. The author just really was out there laying it low, spreading it wide, letting us know that George and Martha was out here together, just plotting to make sure that they would never lose their slaves. That's their money, that bread and butter, what they was going to do. I mean, George was broke, but what they was going to do with what they had. They had all these houses living above their means, acting like they IG models when they really the Wish version. But I want to know y'all thoughts. Did y'all know that Washington was low down, disobeying the law, using it to their advantage while trying to enslave people and not trying to set them free, while lying and saying that they cared about their families? What do y'all think?